Hello, Dean Guthrie. So tell us a little bit about, you recently wrote about the release of the UN's FDI report, and you talk a little bit about how this is another indication of China's rising economic prowess. Yet at the same time, there are still critics who dismiss China's growth, and they still viewed through this second-tier city phenomenon. Tell us a little bit about why you think China is still being underestimated as an economic power.
Sure. So two of the key figures that I've been thinking about lately are really on this, the last in a long line of people who just continue to make the case that China's economic growth is really a house of cards. It's not all that it's made up to be. One of them who's been in the news lately is a guy named James Chanos, who, he's famous as a hedge fund manager, very successful. He was famous for having shorted Enron, and now China is the next case that he's shorting and making the case that this is all really a house of cards and it's a real estate bubble, and et cetera. Then another was an individual, what they call a futurist, I guess these days, a guy named George Friedman, who's really kind of dismissive of China and makes the case that there's nothing interesting going on here economically. And I just think this kind of underestimation of what's happening in China on both of those fronts really indicates just a lack of deep understanding of what's happening in China. And that leads me to one of the things that I like to think about recently, and I've written about in a number of different venues, that what I think of as China's second-tier city phenomenon. So if you take a group of executives or just individuals travel to China and you go to Beijing and Shanghai, you get one very particular picture of what's actually happening in China. But the really interesting stories today are really the next step or the next order phenomenon of what's happening in China, and that's really the second-tier city phenomenon. So the places to really look in China are not in what is a real estate bubble in places like Shanghai and Beijing, but actually in places like Chengdu, Suzhou, Xi'an, Dalian. These are cities that people don't know nearly as well, but they are really the cities in which entrepreneurial governments are working very aggressively with multinational corporations to develop really, really interesting economic portfolios that are taking them much further, much faster in the economic reforms. So if you think about key examples of this, the case of Chengdu was set up to compete, Chongqing was really set up to be the competitive leader in the movement west of the economies. But Chengdu is a smaller entrepreneurial government. It's a sub-provincial government in Sichuan province, and they have been so effective in capturing foreign capital. Intel was the first to really kind of make the move to Chengdu, but since then the flow of foreign capital has just been dramatic into Chengdu, and it's just an amazing story about what's going on economically. Another example is Suzhou, which is about 100 miles west of Shanghai, and it's been, at one time in the mid-2000s, it was the largest destination of foreign direct investment because of some very innovative things that were going on in the economic development process and a very entrepreneurial municipal government that was really driving that process forward. And so I just think it's interesting I really kind of encourage students and scholars of China and business people to really look deeper inside of what's going on in China and to really think effectively about what the economic reform processes are there.
Thank you.